Good evening. It's late on March 19th, and I was motivated to put together this video based on the lockdown notice I received on my phone from Governor Newsom that the state of California and the entire state was now in lockdown. So I thought it would be clever to label this COVID-19 California Lockdown Edition. Having gone through some of the math based on the new data for some of our states, I think I should have taken a less flip tone. I'm sorry. Today's news: U.S. hospitals will run out of beds if we continue on at the pace we're going. Today in the news, Italy now has more coronavirus deaths than China. Those are very sobering pieces of news. The coronavirus is now in all 50 states. At a news conference, President Donald Trump said the malaria drug chloroquine and the experimental antiviral drug remdesivir are being tested as possible COVID-19 therapies. It could slow the epidemic. There's a problem with that. Therapies treat people when they're sick. They don't actually interfere with the spread of the disease. So that's the first fundamental problem there. And then there's this, from a scientist's point of view, bizarre sentence. It could have a very positive effect, or a positive effect. Maybe not very, but maybe positive, Trump said. It's very, very exciting. We can't afford to have political speak, imprecise, inaccurate mischaracterizations of this epidemic. It is just not acceptable. Today's news, there was a big article that U.S. state coronavirus curves all show they can be close behind New York. And when I talked about coronavirus growth in terms of confirmed cases in the U.S. 3 or 4 days ago, I showed California, Washington, and New York. And sure enough, they all showed exponential growth, although at slightly different rates. And so these graphs don't really help that very much. If you do notice, they are on a log scale, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, which is appropriate. And what you're looking for is parallel lines. If they're parallel lines, they're growing at similar rates. But we can do better than that in terms of our precision. So this is the notice that came to my phone. We're now in a lockdown. And for more information, go visit the state's website. I approve of this. I think everything we can do, we have to do. So let me first start looking at the question of, was this news today surprising? Did it catch us off guard? Well, I took the presentation I gave several days ago. That's this left panel. And remember, I had fit two different models. I hope you've seen them, but if you didn't, I fit two different models to the data in log 10 space. One is based on all of March. The other is based on the most recent week in March. Well, when we look right now for the U.S., we've added 3 days since then. And the first 2 days continued along the red line trajectory. And this third day, today, took a little hop up closer to the blue line. So we're seeing continued exponential growth, but today's number is a little out of whack. Now, we've talked about the fact that the U.S. has done just an abysmal job testing, and maybe this is our testing trying to catch up with the actual number of cases. And if that's the case, we're going to transition to a higher curve, the blue curve, or maybe even worse. On the log 10 scale, of course, it doesn't look that surprising or terrifying, but I remember I made this graph with the data from March 1st through the 16th. There are my predictions. I predicted on the 19th, which is today, that on my low estimate, we would have 10,183 cases. My high estimate was 14,766. I take no pleasure in telling you that we have 13,593, which is within my prediction interval, but closer to the blue line. So we are seeing exponential growth, and it may be accelerating. Now, the reason it's so important to know whether we're on the red line or the blue line is we take them out to the end of March. At the end of March, the red line will be at 250,000 confirmed cases. The blue line at 762,000. That's 500,000 different cases different. So the range of prediction, of course, gets very broad as we go further into the future, in part because of the uncertainty in the current data, and in part because, of course, we have the chance, hopefully, to change our behavior, maybe influence that. So when we're looking at these patterns in each state, this is the graph that I presented on March 17th. That's California, Washington, and New York. And you can see that they are growing at very similar exponential rates, although not exactly the same. I went through a process of showing the different rates of spread. These are the same graphs from 3 days ago, except I've added 3 dots, the 16th, 17th, and 18th, or 17th, 18th, and 19th. I have the 19th data now. Which are these 3 black squares or circles or triangles. Now, I want you to notice a couple of things. California is sort of steady on what it's been doing. New York, if you look at this last week or 10 days, it's got a concave up shape to it, which means the epidemic might be accelerating, which would be very, very scary because it already had the steepest slope. Washington, on the other hand, is sort of this flattening starting to happen. It's starting to slow down. It doesn't mean it's actually getting no cases. It's the acceleration in those cases is starting to slow down. And Washington, the governor declared a state of emergency on February 29th, so that was 3 weeks ago. So maybe that early declaration helped drive changes in behavior, and maybe now, several weeks later, we're starting to see some benefit from that, because there'll be at least a 2-week lag between anything we do today and when it will start showing up in the growth of our epidemic because of the time lag between getting the virus, first symptoms, and getting quite sick. Now, these slopes don't look greatly different in this log 10 space, but if you look at them more carefully, you'll see that right now Washington has slowed down to 18% per day growth, doubling every 4 days. So doubling every 4 days is the good news. California has been doubling about every 3 days. That continues on. That's the intermediate news. And the bad news is New York is growing at an astonishing 43% per day. It's doubling every 2 days. Every 2 days. So, a couple headlines. Coronavirus cases could reach 64,000 in Washington state by May, governor says. This was now almost 10 days ago, so let's cut the governor some slack if his numbers aren't so great. But Washington appears to be slowing at this current rate, the more slow rate. I refit this line based on the last week of data, this doubling every day, 4 days. We have 1,370 cases today in Washington state. I think we will hit 64,000 on April 12th. And I think that if we keep on this rate, we'll hit 1 million cases in Washington by May 1st. Now, as the epidemic spreads and more people get infected, there are fewer and fewer susceptibles. And so it has to slow down at some point as it rips through the population. So I'm not saying we will for sure get 1 million by May 1st, but that is the trajectory Washington is on. 64,000 cases, not by May, but by mid-April. Okay, well, that was the best news. New York Governor Cuomo orders 75% of non-essential workforce to stay home as coronavirus cases surge to 4,152. Well, according to the data set I have that I downloaded tonight, the most recent count is 5,370 cases. With this higher rate, that's doubling every second day, New York will hit 100,000 cases on March 30th, so in 11 days. And they would be over 1 million by mid-April. So a month out, less than a month out, New York could see 1 million cases unless they contain this incredible growth in the epidemic. So that's why these orders are so important, and it's so important to try to avoid contact. As I showed you before, the governor has ordered the entire state on lockdown. There was an article that came out a day or two ago that the governor says coronavirus likely to close California schools until summer, not a week, not 2 weeks, not 3 weeks. And I want to be straight with you. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I agree completely. I can't see any other way around it. This 24% per day growth, we have 952 cases on the March 19th. We'll hit 100,000 cases in California on April 12th and 1 million by late April. Did I update that correctly? Yes, I did. Okay, 64,000. Okay, yeah. So California will be at 100,000 on April 12th and 1 million by late April. So if this continues, New York will hit 1 million, and then California will hit 1 million, and then Washington will hit 1 million, each a few days apart. So we could be looking at, just from those 3 states, 3 million cases by the end of April. 3 million, just think about that. Then I wanted to throw something else at you. It's not just those 3 states. Those 3 states are further along the trajectory, but the growth rates are similar in a lot of the other states. I'm from Ohio, from Cleveland. I have a, heart. Heart is in Ohio. It's a heart-shaped state. Kind of an end joke there. They shut down their polls for their election instead of having the primary. The state came under a lot of criticism for that. But in the past week, Ohio grew at a rate faster than New York, at the current very high rate, which I don't think is sustainable. I think it's an artifact of discovering cases and testing. I don't think it can maintain that rate, but it would beat California and Washington to 1 million cases. So if you're in Ohio and you're thinking, wow, New York's got a problem because they have 5,000 cases or whatever the number is, and we've only got, 100, doesn't matter. Exponential growth is just an incredibly fast process, and it's all about how quickly it doubles. And right now, Ohio would be doubling faster than every other day, just slightly faster than that. So there are states that have very few cases, but the trajectory looks very disturbing. So, clipping today's Johns Hopkins dashboard, Italy now has 3,405 deaths reported. That surpasses Hubei in China as the single largest number of deaths. At the current rate of growth of the pandemic in the US, I think we will likely see 2,000 to 4,000 deaths by the end of March. That's 12 days from now. 2,000 to 4,000 deaths, and it'll go up from there. And it'll go up more quickly because there's a delay between the epidemic causing infection and then people getting ill and developing severe illnesses. So I fear that what we see in the data is actually some acceleration because the death rate, the number of individuals dying is the ones we're seeing dying right now got infected 2 or 3 weeks ago at the early part of this growth phase, and it may accelerate. And so we could very well find ourselves in April having places where the hospital systems can't handle the influx of very sick individuals. And if that's the case, that will further accelerate the death rate. So going back to my very first slide, California Lockdown Edition. It's not very funny, is it? 244,000 cases worldwide. It's going up now at 20 or 30,000 cases a day. And as I said, I can't imagine a scenario in which we don't have 1 million cases in the US by mid-April. I wish that weren't true. So let's work together. Let's stay out of it, maintain social isolation. When they order a lockdown, please stay at home. Do this for yourself, do this for your loved ones. Keep saying this, it's unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen. I don't know if we can even wrap our heads around how bad this could be. I'm not saying it will be, although I fear it might. But this could be something that just is worse than some of our most extreme horror movies I've ever encountered. Maybe I'm tired. I've been doing this a long time. It's a hard day. That's all I can say.